Hello everybody, welcome back to yet another video of FikarNot.com. Now FikarNot from studies. So today we're going to be starting a brand new chapter that's tissues, plant and animal tissues. So before we even start with this chapter, as always, I want to ask you all a question. What do you understand by the term tissues? In biology, of course, not the tissues that you use as a hanky to sneeze on or to wipe your nose or to wipe your hands. No. The tissues that you find inside your body. What do you understand by that term of tissues? I'll give you about 5 seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So I hope all of you have submitted your hypothesis in the comment section below. And now let's change this hypothesis into the solution by getting to know the solution of what tissues actually are. So as we all know, a single cell working on its own would achieve very little inside an animal or a plant, of course, because a cell is how much? It's this small. I can't even say it's even smaller than this dot that I've drawn over here. You can see this dot very well, but a cell is even smaller than that. You can only see a cell under a very powerful microscope like a compound microscope or an electron microscope, right? So, a single cell working in such a big and huge adult body, or any animal, or a plant, or a tree, or anything of that sort, it would be very hard for a single cell to perform everything, right? Conduct impulses, then breathe, or handling the heartbeat of our body and keeping us alive. It will be too much for that little tiny cell. So, what do? Well, we have come up with the solution of this. So many similar cells, if we put them together, then won't our body be more efficient and won't it work even more properly, or won't it work efficiently? Well, of course it will. So these similar cells of the same kind, lying side to side, working together to achieve a single task, these group of cells of the same type are called as tissues. And we will describe here only the common plant and animal tissues. Here, as in this textbook, we'll only study about plant and animal tissues as of now. So, tissues are also called as the teams of workers, and its proper definition is a tissue is a group of similar cells performing a specific function. So 2 words I want you to underline over here are similar cells and specific functions, because different cells that have different functions cannot come together and perform a specific function. That's not possible, because, for example, if I tell your father or your mother, who, let's take an example, just an example, okay, who have specialized in the form of baking, to do accounting in a bakery shop or to do accounting in a bank, they won't be able to, right? Because they are specialized to bake, or they are bakers, right? Or if I tell you your mom and dad they have specialized in the form of finance, okay, they're specialized in the field of finance, and if I tell them to become a chef and work in a restaurant, in a 5-star Michelin 5-star restaurant, they won't be able to, will they? Of course not. Why? Because they're specialized in the field of finance. So if I tell them to bake, or if I tell them to become a chef in a 5-star in a Michelin 5-star restaurant, that would be impossible for them unless and until it's their hobby. But in most cases, they won't be able to. Similarly, in our body also, we need a group of similar cells working together that they're specialized in to perform a specific function. So most plants and animal cells possess a tissue system. The human body, for example, has an epithelial tissue covering the skin, and the muscular tissue made up of muscle cells, which by contraction bring about movements. In a plant, the conductive tissues conduct waters upwards from the soil to the aerial parts of and food prepared from the leaves to the lower parts, of course, of the plant, right? Now, the relationship between the tissue, organ system, and organism is a very unique kind. The relationship between these these four types of substances that we find in our body is of a very unique kind. Why? Because a group of similar cells performing a specific function come together to form a tissue. Then similar tissues come together to form organs. Then different organs come together to form organ systems, and different organ systems come together to form an organism. And that organism is you, me, and anyone we see around us. Let's take an example over here. Tissues, let's say the cardiac tissues, they come together to form what? An organ, right? Then the organ is your heart over here. Then the heart comes together to form the entire cardiac system. That's your heart beating, right? Your nerves, the blood, oxygen, everything together. And different organ systems, like let's say the cardiac system, the respiratory system, or not the cardiac system, sorry, the circulatory system, and the respiratory system, the nervous system, all of these systems come together to form an organism. And this organism is, once again, is you, me, and anyone else we see around us. So now, first of all, let's start with a plant tissue, and let's get to know what a plant tissue is. Let me scroll up for you. Right. So plant tissues are basically of two types. That's meristematic and permanent. Meristematic are cells can multiply to produce new cells, and permanent tissues are non-dividing cells, and they're specialized cells as well. All right. So we'll start with meristematic tissues first, then we'll go on to permanent tissues, and we'll look at the permanent tissues subtypes. So we have learned in our previous grades, you can say grade 6, grade 7 or grade 8, we have learned that meristematic tissues are tissues that keep on dividing and dividing and dividing to produce new cells. They never stop. They're like they're like a newborn baby who has just born and keeps on growing and growing and growing until the baby hits puberty. That's the age where they don't stop growing exactly, but they become emotionally mature or reproductively mature. Right? Similarly with meristematic tissues, let's compare it to a baby. A meristematic tissue is almost like a baby, as I just said. It keeps on growing and never stops. Meristematic tissues are found at all growing points of a plant, such as the tips of roots, stems, and branches. It is also present between the bark and the wood of trees, where it leads to growth in the diameter of the stem. So it's either present in the stem or the leaves of any plant that we say, let's say a money plant or any plant as such, that grows in lengths like this, like this, like this, or either it is present in really big trees that have wood that only and only grow in diameter. So from this, it turns into this. Why? Because the meristematic tissue, they keep on dividing, 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 and dividing. Right? They don't stop. Now, the chief characteristics of the meristematic tissues are, first, that the cells are small. They are usually cubical. Cell wall is thin, and the nuclei is large. Furthermore, adding on, the vacuoles are almost absent. Cells are tightly packed with almost no intercellular spaces. The cells actively divide, adding new cells to the plant, and new cells thus produced are transformed into mature permanent tissues. Okay, so let's look at these points slowly and carefully one by one, and let's understand what it stands for. First thing, cells are small. Of course, the cells will be small, right? Because if you have one giant cell, that one giant cell makes another, then it keeps on going. The organism will end up being an extremely huge one, like a dinosaur, like a devil, right? So the cells have to be extremely small so that they can keep on dividing and dividing until they mature on their level. Then cells are usually cubical, then cell wall is thin. These are just facts. A nuclei is large. Vacuoles are almost absent. Now, why are vacuoles almost absent? Why do the vacuoles have to be absent in the meristematic cells? Well, it is because, think about it, meristematic cells are cells that are not matured. That's why we compare it to a baby, right? They keep on dividing and dividing and dividing. So it does not really need storage or support as of now because it is not permanent. One more example of meristematic tissues can be your teeth. The milk teeth that falls and falls and falls and falls until one day they become permanent. So at first it does not need support because your teeth will keep on falling. But once it becomes mature, once it reaches the stage of your permanent teeth that will not fall anymore. Even if it does, it won't grow back. That is when it will need the support that it has and it needs. Why? Because once a permanent teeth falls off, it won't grow back up because they are not actively dividing, like in the case of meristematic and permanent tissues. So now you tell me, do meristematic tissues need vacuoles? Of course they don't, right? Because they do not need the storage or the support. Then cells are tightly packed with almost no intercellular spaces. That's very true because again they're actively dividing. Then cells actively divide, adding new cells to the plant, and new cells thus produced are transformed into mature permanent tissues, as I just said. Again, one accurate example would be your teeth. Okay, then the meristematic tissue can be classified into two categories. That's the apical meristem and cambium or lateral meristem. So meristematic tissue is also divided into two subtypes. That's your apical or terminal and cambium or lateral. So let's go on to the next page and let's see what these subtypes are all about. All right. First one, apical or terminal. So this is located near the tips of roots and stems and also in the growing young leaves near the tips of the stems as well as on the tips of the axillary buds. So what do we understand from this paragraph? Of course, that when we say that it is located near the tips of the roots and stems, this stands for that this type of meristematic tissue is meant to increase in length like this, like this, like this, like this. So it's present at the tip of your stem. So it keeps on growing and growing and becomes into a permanent plant. Then your leaves that again has to keep on growing in its length, right? Again your stem and once again your leaf. And also in the growing young leaves near the tip of the stems, of course it is present in the growing young leaves as I just said. And also one more thing, it is present in the tip of the roots, because the roots first they may look like this, but after some time they will grow massively and they will keep going under the soil and they'll basically capture the whole soil after some time. So of course it is present in the tip of the roots as well. So apical or the terminal meristematic tissue is basically only meant for the growth in the terms of length. So it is only meant for the growth in the terms of length. All right. Second one is the cambium or the lateral meristematic tissue. Now this is situated between below the bark and is responsible for the increase in diameter of the stem. So the second type will be the ones that are present in really big trees or gigantic trees that have hardcore wood that have to increase in diameter. So from, let's say from this, it has to turn into this size. Look at the difference, this much difference, right? And so therefore it is present in gigantic trees that need increase in diameter and not only in length. Now, according to the function performed by both of these, we can conclude by saying that both of these have main functions, and their main functions are only to grow, be it in length or in diameter. That's why they're subtypes of meristematic tissues. Perfect. So with this, we come to an end of the meristematic tissues. Now let's move on to the second type. That's the permanent tissues. Now permanent tissues have a lot of subtypes, so be ready for that. I would suggest that from now on, whatever I'm saying, take a piece of paper and start making a complete flowchart. Hang it in your room or wherever you study, because this is a really very huge family of tissues. It has many subtypes. All right. So, without further ado, let's start. Okay, so permanent tissues are made up of cells which have lost their ability to divide. So over here, we come to the stage where your teeth have become permanent, and once they fall, they cannot regrow because they have lost the ability to divide. Similarly, over here in plants, permanent tissues are the stage that the plants reach where they cannot divide anymore and they have become matured cells. They take a permanent shape to perform some permanent functions, and they may be living, nucleus present, or they also may be dead when the nucleus is absent, because we all know nucleus is the living part of the cell. Now, according to the function performed, the permanent tissues are of three types: protective, supportive, and conducting. Alright? So I will keep having revisions throughout this lesson so that we remember the whole flow chart that we have to go through right now. Okay, so under plant tissues you have meristematic and permanent, and under permanent you have supportive, protective, and conducting. So let's start off with the protective tissues. So protective tissues are cells with thick walls. So as the name suggests, protective, their function is to protect the plant cells. What do? Of course, as I just said, they protect the plant cells. So thus, they have thick walls. Now, as I've said before in our previous sessions as well, if a cell has thick walls, it protects the particular organism. Now, why? Ask me why. Let's take an example of our skin, alright? Our skin may have many layers, but it is very thin, right? It has a very, very thin layer. Now, if I tell you in our body we have no bones, we have no cartilages, we have nothing of that sort, we only have our skin to protect our body, we won't be able to walk, we won't be able to have that muscular body that we have. Will we? Of course not, right? Because skin is a very thin material, or it has multiple thin layers, so it cannot really protect our body properly. While cartilages or bones, they have thick walls that can actually protect our body. So protective tissues, of course, they will have thick walls that protect the plant from any you can say any injuries, etc. Right? And they are found on the surface of roots, stems, and leaves. Now, why is that? Why are they found on the surface of roots, stems, and leaves? Because these parts are the ones that need main protection. Roots, because they are the source of minerals and waters. Stems, they hold the whole plant together, right? And of course, your leaves, because they help the plant survive through photosynthesis. So, that is where the protective tissues are present. Some examples of protective tissues are epidermis of leaves, which secretes a waxy waterproof material. Cork cells in the barks contain another strong waterproof material. Alright, so this was the protective tissue. Now let's move on to the second type, that's the supportive tissue. Alright, so supportive tissue is of several types. The three most important ones are parenchyma, Kalenchyma, and Sclerenchyma. Starting off with parenchyma. So parenchyma are large, thin-walled cells, oval, circular, or polygonal in shape. There usually is a single large vacuole. It is found in the soft parts of a plant, such as the cortex, outer region, in the pits, and the central region. It may store food in potatoes, and they provide temporary support to the plant. Now, some parenchyma cells, particularly in the leaf, contain chloroplasts, and they are termed as chlorenchyma. Chloros, that's green, and Chlorenchyma helps in the leaf to produce food by photosynthesis. Alright, so supporting tissues. Okay, so as I was saying, parenchyma parenchyma cells, they are a subtype of supportive tissues, and as the name suggests, are supportive tissues, they support the plant, right? Protect as in, so now the difference between protective and supportive is supportive as in give the shape to the plant, support the plant to hold the shape, right? While protective tissues are the ones that protect the tissues from protect the organism from any injuries, internal or external injuries, right? So supportive tissues, basically they support the plant, they help the plant stand, and they help the plant have that structure that it has. So parenchyma are thin walled cells, oval, circular or polygonal in shape. They usually have a single vacuole, they're found in the soft parts, and they may store food and potatoes. They provide a temporary support to the plant as well. Now the thing with parenchyma cells is that with the type of function that it has, it may be of two different types. Not two different types, but its name may change. For example, if it's present in the leaf, it names become it name sorry it names sorry again its name becomes Chlorenchyma. Why? Because the chloroplast present in the leaf, okay, it changes the parenchyma into Chlorenchyma. Why? Because chloroplasts, let's join the name, right? Chloroplasts and parenchyma. So Chlorenchyma, put these two names together and you get Chlorenchyma. What do you get? Chlorenchyma. So Chlorenchyma helps the leaf to produce food by photosynthesis, because that's what chloroplast does, right? It is green in color, and it helps, it not only gives the green color of the leaf that it has, but it also helps the plant in photosynthesis. Now if the parenchyma has air between its air pockets, like let's say the Chlorenchyma looks like this, it has some air between them, what will it be named? It will be named Parenchyma. So it keeps changing with wherever it is present. Alright. Now the second type is Kalenchyma. It is made up of cells which are elongated and the cell wall is thickened at the corners. It is found in the leaf stalks and below the epidermis of the stems, and the tissue helps to support the parts of the plant. Okay. It's honestly, Kalenchyma is self-explanatory. It has cell wall which is thickened at the corners because it supports the plant, as I already said, and it is made up of cells which are elongated. It is found in the leaf stalks, etc. Then we have the Sclerenchyma, which are composed of long, narrow cells which have become dead. Now, Sclerenchyma, its walls, it has thick walls, but it is due to the deposition of lignin. Now when you see lignin, we all know that lignin is a non-living substance. Therefore Sclerenchyma also becomes a non-living substance. Sclerenchyma is a dead cell. It is composed of long narrow cells which have become dead. Now this tissue provides strength to the plant because of the deposition of lignin that we all know is meant for the support of an organism. Therefore Sclerenchyma is also dead, and it supports the plant and it provides strength to the plant. It is found in the stems of it is found in stems and veins of the leaves, and the above three categories, namely Parenchyma, Kalenchyma and Sclerenchyma, are grouped as simple tissues, each being made of one type of cell, only and only one type of cell, right? Now, the third type is conductive tissues. They are named as complex tissues. Now, why? You'll get to know. One hypothesis that comes in my mind is solely because it is made up of different type of cells. But of course, we'll see the solution in just a moment. Okay, Conductive tissues are also known as vascular tissues. They provide a passage for water and dissolved materials to move up and down. In the plant, the xylem and the phloem are of two types of conductive tissues. First is xylem cells. They are elongated and thick walled. These cells are somewhat in the form of tubular passages. So what the xylem does is, okay, it has tube-like structures, okay, just like this. And materials like water and minerals, they pass through these tube-like structures. So let's say this green color that I have over here is water and minerals. So through the tube they pass, and thus the whole plant is able to get water and minerals. So in a basic plant, how it looks like is, let me just rub this and show it to you. So let's say this is your basic plant, these are your leaves and these are your roots. So what the xylem does is, this is the xylem inside the cell. It creates tube-like structures, and from the roots, that is the basic source of water and minerals, the xylem takes up the water and minerals and it transports it to the leaves for photosynthesis, the plant or the stem, and all the parts of the plant. Thus, the plant this way gets nutrition. Fine, and they provide the support for an upward movement of water in dissolved materials. As I just said, upward movement. Why? Because it goes from the roots to different parts of the plant. Alright, and dissolved materials absorbed from the soil by the roots to other parts of the plant, and older xylem tissue forms the wood and does not participate in transport. You can determine the age of the tree by counting the annual rings, which actually are the xylem rings, and the number of xylem rings that it has, we can predict the age of the plant from that. Now the xylem tissue consists of tracheals and vessels, and they're called as tracheary elements. Tracheary elements, why? Because they help in the transport of water, minerals, and other substances like that. Now Xylem Parenchyma and Xylem fibers are also some parts that come under the xylem tissues respectively. So let's start with tracheals first. So tracheals are made up of elongated dead cells, okay, with large cavities without any contents. The cells are placed end to end, forming a long tube. They have highly lignified cell walls, and they also provide mechanical support. Now, how do they provide mechanical support? As this paragraph says, they are highly lignified cell walls. Lignified as in they can provide the mechanical support and all the support that the passage or the tube needs to provide the nutrition to the plant. And by developing various types of thickening in their walls, they're able to provide the mechanical support. Now, second one, xylem vessels or tracheae are long tube-like structures meant for transporting water and dissolved materials. Very similar to tracheals, that's why they both are called as the tracheary elements. They are made up of elongated cells placed end by end, end to end, and their cells are quite hard, thick and lignified. Transverse cells gets dissolved and make a continuous water pipe. So while tracheals have highly lignified walls, xylem vessels, they have very hard walls. So you see the difference here, right? Then the third one is Xylem Parenchyma. This is the living part of the cell, and it consists of living parenchyma cells associated with the xylem. These cells serve for the storage of food, sugars, and starch, and also help in the conduction of water and minerals. So these were the three subtypes that we have under xylem. Now let's go on to phloem. But before we do, let me just show you this little photo. These are the various types of tracheates. They can be in tube-like structures which are perforated, multiple perforations. They can be in ring-like structures, any type. So it's not only one passage that it creates, it can create any passage that it wants. Okay? Perfect. Now let's go on to the phloem cells or the phloem tissues. So phloem tissues, they provide a passage for the downward movement of food manufactured in the leaves. So as we just said, xylem provides an upward movement. Why? Because they transport water and minerals only. But over here it's written that phloem provides a downward movement. Now why? Because it transports food instead of water and minerals. Now, why downward? Because let's say this is our plant again. Okay, this is your leaves, your roots. Okay, so where is the food made in a plant? In the leaves, right? So from the leaves, the phloem gets all the nutrition and the food, the starch, whatever, from the leaves, and then it provides a downward movement through the stem, through all the parts of the plant to give the nutrition that it needs. And it provides a downward movement of food manufactured in the leaves to various parts of the plant. They also provide the upward movement of prepared food towards the growing new leaves. Upward movement to new growing leaves, meaning that, let me drop this diagram and let me draw a new fresh diagram. Let's say this is your plant. Okay, these are the leaves that are quite old and they provide food and nutrition to the plant. Now, if there are new baby leaves that are growing over here that need the nutrition to grow and become matured leaves, phloem sometimes also provides an upward movement from these leaves to these leaves, so that these leaves also get the nutrition and they are not missed out. So mainly it's only downward, but sometimes they also provide upward movement. Okay, now the phloem consists of sieve tubes, companion cells, phloem parenchyma cells, and phloem fibers. Now let's start with the first type, that's the sieve tubes. Now, just like your tracheals or the Xylem Vessels or tracheals, sieve tubes are also made up of elongated cells placed end to end, forming a long tube. The transverse walls are perforated and are called as sieve plates. So the perforations that the sieve tubes have are called as sieve plates. They help in the transport of food from leaves to storage organs and other parts of the plant. Second one is companion cells. They are living parenchyma cells closely associated with sieve tube cells. They help in the functioning of this sieve tube cell. Then the phloem parenchyma is again the living part of the cell. They are concerned with the storage of starch, fat, and other organic food material. And phloem fibers are Kalenchyma tissues found associated with phloem, and they mainly provide support. Now, why do they mainly provide support only? Just because they're highly lignified cells again. So they can provide the support that it has. Okay, so with this we come to an end of the phloem tissue as well, and xylem and phloem are collectively called, or they collectively form the vascular bundles. The veins of leaves are examples of vascular bundles. They are in continuity with the conductive tissues of stem and root, and the above two tissues, xylem and phloem, are made up of complex tissues, being made of more than one type of cells working together as a unit. Perfect. So with this, we come to an end of our entire first part of this chapter. That's tissues, the plant tissues. In the next video, we'll talk about animal tissues, the epithelial tissues, connective tissues, muscle tissues, neural tissues, and get ready for that video as well. As of now, let's take a quick summary of the plant tissues. And as homework, I'll give you the progress check and all the questions related to the first part of this chapter. So again, this is a little flowchart summary of plant and animal tissues. Under that we get meristematic and permanent. Under permanent we have protective, supportive, and conducting. Under supportive we have parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma. Under conducting we have xylem and phloem, and under xylem and phloem also we have your tracheals, then the Tracheals, the Xylem Parenchyma, Phloem Parenchyma, sieve tubes, companion cells, and phloem fibers. So I hope you all understood this chapter, or the first part of this chapter. Stay tuned for the next part, and I'll see you guys the next time. Bye.